Neil Gaiman's Sandman is among the most iconic comic book series of all time. Fans have been clamoring for some kind of adaptation of it for decades, and the author, Neil Gaiman himself, has been quite protective of it, and opposed it when past attempts at adaptations wanted to change the material to fit the news cycle of the day. Not anymore though. Now, he appears to be clamoring for the kind of topical changes he opposed in the past. It's still early days, but could this be an indication that the Netflix Sandman series might go woke, as it were? In this editorial, I will begin by briefly going through what the Sandman stories are all about, before exploring how creator Neil Gaiman resisted past adaptations changing fundamental aspects of his work, how he appears to welcome such changes now, and finally, if we as fans have reason to worry. The Sandman is a 75-issue comic book series written by Neil Gaiman and published by DC Comics between 1989 and 1996. With some later editions. The whole series has been continuously reprinted in paperbacks ever since, and these paperbacks should by rights be in everyone's collection, even non-comic book readers. The stories are set in the Vertigo universe and have featured John Constantine, as conceived by Alan Moore, as well as Lucifer, whose adventures were later expanded upon by Mike Carey before being butchered for TV and reimagined as, of all things, a police procedural starring Tom Ellis. But back to Sandman. The stories themselves are dark fantasy and tell the story of Dream of the Endless, also known as Morpheus, who rules over the world of dreams. The series is famous for Gaiman's trademark use of anthropomorphic personification of various metaphysical entities, while also blending mythology and history in its horror setting within the DC universe. The Sandman was Vertigo's flagship title and one of the first few graphic novels ever to be on the New York Times bestseller list, along with Mouse, Watchmen, and The Dark Knight Returns. Various film and television versions of the Sandman have been developed unsuccessfully since the 1990s. In a panel at the San Diego Comic-Con International in 2007, Gaiman remarked that he'd rather see no Sandman movie made than a bad Sandman movie. Keep that in mind as we explore his response to attempted adaptations in the past and his response to the current year adaptation. Throughout the late 1990s, a film adaptation of the comic was periodically planned by Warner Bros., parent company of DC Comics. It was to be produced by Jon Peters of Superman Lives fame. Yes, that Jon Peters. The one who wanted a Superman movie with no cape, no flying, but hand-to-hand fights against polar bears and giant spiders. After a number of writers had delivered some halfway decent drafts for a Sandman movie which combined the storylines from Preludes and Nocturnes, as well as The Doll's House, Jon Peters decided that this wouldn't do, and so hired William Farmer and gave him detailed instructions for how the story needed to be changed to fit the then current year. Maybe one day I'll do a detailed script review and comparison with the comic, but until then, here are some highlights. This script was written in 1998, and it was all about the Y2K scare, so they were obviously aiming for a fall of 1999 release. The story here is that Morpheus has been captured by humans, but after a century he awakens and needs to retrieve 3 items that contain a part of his essence. If you're familiar with the comics, you might be tempted to think, well, so far so good. But I assure you, it is anything but. Because we are dealing with death and resurrection, a Morpheus that physically beats people up, gets hurt, and in the process ends up in a hospital. But he isn't the only one looking for these 3 magical items. An angel is looking for them too, and this angel is called the Corinthian. And here's the twist. He and Morpheus are brothers. Now, if you're not familiar with the comics, then you're probably thinking, so? But I assure you that everyone who do know their Sandman are either laughing manically or projectile vomiting right about now, because this is the same level of stupidity as Brainiac having a gay robot servant and fighting polar bears outside the Fortress of Solitude. And it gets worse. You see, the Corinthian has this bet going on with his and Morpheus' other brother, namely Lucifer, over who can get these magic items before the year 2000. And if neither Morpheus nor the Corinthian gets them, well then Lucifer will bring hell to Earth. Oh, and in the end, it was all just a dream. Spoiler alert, I guess. Or at least it would have been if this bastardization ever saw the light of day, which it thankfully didn't. As a courtesy, Jon Peters and his cronies at Warner sent a copy of the script to Neil Gaiman, who was asked to give his feedback on how awesome it was, because they seemingly just wanted to be praised for their brilliance. To their dismay, Gaiman essentially told them, to their face, that it was the worst script he had ever read bar none. When asked if he didn't like the genius idea of making them all brothers, Gaiman let them know that no, that was if anything what he liked the least. And tying it all to the year 2000 was pretty lame too. Warner's didn't send him any more scripts after that. Gaiman has since doubled down on how bad that script was on multiple occasions, and made it clear that he would rather see no Sandman adaptation than a bad one. What Jon Peters had missed? Well, he missed many things of course, but chief among them is that one of the key features of Gaiman's work is that it is timeless. You can set the backdrop in pretty much any era and have the story and characters work like a charm. But grafting whatever is causing headlines while the movie is being developed onto the story and production is a recipe for disaster. If they had gone with the Y2K angle, the movie would have been dated, and in a bad way, before it even left theaters. Since then, 2 decades have passed, and multiple iterations of the movie have come and gone. Right now, it's being developed as a series for Netflix. The Sandman isn't only being developed as a Netflix series. It was just released as an Audible exclusive audio drama, featuring James McAvoy, Taron Egerton, Michael Sheen, and Andy Serkis to name but a few. If you want it, be sure to head on over to audible.com/midnightsedge or text midnightsedge to 500 500. In promoting that audio drama, however, Neil Gaiman spoke to comicbook.com, and then the Netflix series also came up. About the Audible release, he said, "One of the things that I keep banging my little drum and trying to explain to everybody that they have to tell people is that this is an adaptation of the first 3 graphic novels. And then the next thing will be seasons of mist, and we'll keep going to the kindly ones, and hopefully we'll keep going all the way to Sandman Overture. And by the time that we finish, it'll be 100 or 120 hours of audio drama. But the idea is that we tell the whole thing. But we also get to do something that I think is kind of special, which is treat it as an audiobook. Because doing the Netflix TV series, here it comes, we're very much looking at that as going, okay, it's 2020. Let's say that I was doing Sandman starting in 2020. What would we do? How would we change things? What gender would this character be? Who would this person be? What would be happening? So, in other words, the audio drama is a straight-up adaptation of the source material, while the Netflix series will be reimagined as if Neil Gaiman and the other Netflix producers wrote it for the first time in 2020. This does not fill me with confidence. Neil Gaiman is a great writer, let there be no doubt about that. He is right up there with Alan Moore. That being said, I am not happy with Neil Gaiman of 2020 going back to rework what Neil Gaiman of the 90s wrote. A creator is never fully satisfied with their creation, Which is why, if there was no release deadline, many would keep on tweaking their work forever, gradually changing it as they themselves change, for better or worse. That's why creators going back to change their older work doesn't necessarily win over the fans of said work. Case in point, no one appreciated Steven Spielberg replacing the guns in E.T. with walkie-talkies, let alone that whole Han shot first debacle. And that was just tweaking the original trilogy. How well do you think it would have gone down if George Lucas had gone all out and actually remade it? That, in some sense, is what Neil Gaiman seemed to be doing here. But keep in mind, fans fell in love with the Sandman a 30-something Neil Gaiman wrote in the 1990s, not what a 60-year-old Neil Gaiman reimagined Sandman to be in 2020. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to read anything new Neil Gaiman of today is making today, for he remains a great writer. What I don't want is to see him reimagine his best work, which was timeless, for today. At the very least, that means gender bending, as he already implied. That in and of its own need not be an issue, but in this highly polarized atmosphere that we're living in right now, little will get any project branded as woke and shunned by the audience as quickly as that. If you don't believe me, go to our most recent Dune video and check the comments for more on that. That would be a shame though, because otherwise, this sounds good. About the past few decades worth of various Sandman projects that went nowhere, Gaiman said, "They've never worked." And they've never worked because of all these special effects and what would be needed to do the special effects. They never worked because you were making something that was adult. People would write Sandman movie scripts, and they go, "But it's an R-rated movie, and we can't have $100 million R-rated movies." So that wouldn't happen. You need to get to a world in which long-form storytelling is an advantage rather than a disadvantage. And the fact that we have 75 issues of Sandman plus, essentially 13 full books, worth of material is a really good thing. It's not a drawback. It's on our side. And the fact that we're in a world in which we can take things that only existed in comic book art, and that can now exist in reality. I get these emails of production stuff on Netflix and Sandman that I just want to show them to everybody. And I know that I can't. They're incredibly confidential, but I look at them and I glow. The other day they sent me Lucifer's castle and the gates to hell and all of these hell designs, and I'm just like, this is amazing, oh my gosh. It's like watching Kelly Jones' nightmares and Sam Keith and Mike Dringenberg's nightmares come to life. We couldn't have done that, I think even 5 years ago, definitely not 10 years ago. The technology wasn't there, the budget wasn't there. The audience wasn't there. The delivery systems weren't there. The idea of going off and doing Preludes and Nocturnes and The Doll's House as our first 10 episodes, nobody would have let us do that. The world wasn't ready. So, it's ready now. They caught up with us. This is all true. A Sandman feature film was honestly never going to work. The story can only be adapted, and adapted well, in a serialized format. As such, Netflix is a great home for it. Now it can look amazing even there, and this is the golden age of serialized storytelling such as this. I just hope they will stick more with the story Gaiman made an instant classic 3 decades ago, and less with how he would have written it today. I worry that special effects aside, a Sandman reimagined for current year will hold up little better a few years from now than would have a Sandman reimagined for Y2K. I hope to be wrong though, as I have waited for a Sandman adaptation for the better part of 20 years, and I want it to be great. Do you think it will be? Or do we have reason to worry? Let me know in the comments, and to check out that Sandman audiobook, head on over to audible.com/midnightsedge or text Midnight's Edge to 500 500.